And good afternoon. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Wednesday, April the 22nd, 2026, and this is our series on Kings and Chronicles. Today we're in 2 Kings chapters 18 and 19, and we'll also be in 2 Chronicles chapter 32. And what this is dealing with is the period when the Assyrians have come and they have swallowed up that northern kingdom of Israel. They started to deport some of the Israeli men into captivity up into Syria and over towards what would be the very northwestern corner of what you and I would know as Iran. It was the area of the Medes. And those men will never return. And the Assyrians are going to send some of their men down and forcibly intermarry with the Jewish women who are in those 10 northern tribes to create a group known as the Samaritans. They are part Jewish, part Assyrian. And so when we open up our New Testaments, we're going to see the area of north of Jerusalem in between Judea and Galilee called Samaria, where a lot of those people who are the descendants of the forced intermarriage now live. And so the southern kingdom of Judah has seen what happened to the northern kingdom. But they haven't really learned the spiritual lesson of it, because their way of thinking is that, okay, yes, God allowed the Assyrians to take the northern tribes into captivity. But after all, those people didn't have a king from the David line on the throne, and we do. And those people weren't worshiping in Jerusalem at the place that God described with the temple and with the Levitical priesthood, and we are. And so they were putting their faith in the wrong thing. But the king of Assyria, who's now firmly in control of the territory of the former nation of Israel, is now setting his eyes on conquering Judah as well. And because he's got a strong, mighty army, he and his soldiers are thinking, as most people in the ancient world did, their gods aren't as good as our gods because our gods have defeated their God. And so the king of Assyria, a fellow by the name of Sennacherib, is having his forces come down, and they are threatening the people of Judah. Even today, if you were to go to Israel on a trip, you could choose to take a tour, if you're not claustrophobic, into a place called Hezekiah's Tunnel. It's an 8th century BC marvel of engineering. The city of Jerusalem is on a high ridge line, and there's not a major river source running through Jerusalem. The Jordan River is about 17 miles further to the east, and it's down in a steep valley. The city of Jerusalem got its water from the Gihon Springs. The problem was, here in the 8th century BC, the Gihon Springs are outside of the city walls. So if an enemy army comes and surrounds your city, you're closing up your city gates. You're not wanting to let anybody in, but that also means you can't get out to get water. And so Hezekiah and his advisors came up with really an ingenious idea. They diverted the Gihon Springs and planted some shrubs to disguise the entrance to it, and they dug a tunnel underground. They had two different groups of people coming from two different directions, and they were chiseling through the solid rock, and they hooked up with each other, and they created what is now called Hezekiah's Tunnel, where water runs through it from outside the city gate walls into the city so that the people could have the water that they would need to survive. Without water, an enemy can starve you out very, very quickly. I've had the privilege of going through Hezekiah's Tunnel, the longest 1,700 yards of my life. It's the distance of about 5.5 football fields in length, and it literally is a very, very narrow tunnel, because even though grown men were chiseling it out in the 8th century BC, the grown men of that era weren't any bigger than the average woman of today, and they're chiseling through solid rock. So it's a case of if you go into the Gihon Springs and you want to take the Hezekiah Tunnel tour, you absolutely have to make up your mind, I'm going through no matter what, because it's so narrow that literally there were places where I had to turn sideways and where I could literally just stand there and put my hands on either side of the wall. There's not enough room for two people to walk side by side. You can only go single file. And there are places where 5'4" Nancy had to stoop to get through. And certainly some of the men in our tour group who were, of average male height, some of them over 6 feet tall, taller, they really had to stoop. But it's a case of having started in, you better go all the way, because if you were to, say, slip, because the water is running, the time of year that I was there was the month of October, and the water was between my knees and the bottom of where my adult women's shorts were. And as you're sloshing along in it, some of the water's gonna spray up on you. So you can go through the water. If I were to stand up now, here, this table would be a little bit higher than what the water level was when I went through. But Hezekiah and his people had to come up with a way to build that tunnel that has existed ever since, to try to use it as a defensive measure to take care of the water needs of the entire population of Jerusalem. And so what we're reading here in chapters 18, 19, and 20 is Jerusalem is being threatened by the Assyrian forces. 2 Kings is where we're going to start, and we'll go to the parallel passage in 2 Chronicles in a little bit. In the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, the king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. Notice what it says about Hezekiah here. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. He broke into pieces the bronze snake Moses had made, for up to that time the Israelites had been burning incense to it. It was called Nehushtan. God had never told the Israelites to burn incense to this bronze snake. If you go back to the book of Numbers, what had happened in the wilderness wanderings, the people had once again rebelled against God and rebelled against the leadership that God had put in place, with Moses as the political leader and Aaron as the very first priest of Israel. And so God decided that he needed to teach the people a lesson. They'd been wandering the desert for quite a number of years. Snakes had always been in the desert. What the people didn't seem to realize was that when they're wandering, this large group of people in the desert, they never encountered the poisonous snakes because God's protective hand was over them. So when God decided to remove his protective hand because they were rebelling against him, nature took its course. Suddenly the snakes were coming into the camp, poisonous snakes, and they were biting people, and people were swelling up and dying, and the people realized that they had messed up badly. And so they had cried out to Moses, asked God to intercede for us. We realized we did wrong. And God's instructions to Moses had been to make a bronze serpent on a pole and put it in the center of the camp. And if anybody was bitten, they would look at the serpent on the pole. In other words, a snake on the tree. And the poison would not harm them any longer. And so that's what they'd done. They had kept that pole all this time, from the time of Moses through Joshua, through the period of Judges, through Saul, David, Solomon, and now several other kings. They've kept this pole, but they're worshiping there in a way that God had not told them to do. And so 2 Kings here is describing that. And Hezekiah, in his zeal for the Lord, takes that bronze serpent and has it smashed to smithereens, so to speak, so that people won't keep on worshiping something that God had told them not to. You see, they were doing just like their brothers in the north had done, wanting to compromise and mix the worship of God with worshiping pagan idols. And because they had been worshiping pagan idols in addition to God, they thought it was all right to worship this Nehushtan, this serpent on the pole. Hezekiah trusted the Lord, the God of Israel. Everything that he's saying about Hezekiah's character right here is something you would want said about you. That he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, that he removed the things that he knew were wrong, that he smashed to pieces the sacred stones and cut down these pagan idols, these Asherah poles, that he trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. You see, that northern kingdom has had nothing but bad kings. They had 19 bad kings in a row. And now that northern kingdom has been swallowed up by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom still exists. And sometimes they have a good king and sometimes they have a bad king. Of their kings, about 1/3 of them are good. The other 2/3 are bad. Hezekiah is one of the good ones, and it says that there was not one like him either before or after. There's going to be another good king, Josiah specifically, but Hezekiah is ranked as being even better than Josiah in his zeal for the Lord. He held fast to the Lord and did not cease to follow him. He kept the commands the Lord had given to Moses, and the Lord, and you'll notice that Lord there is all capital letters in a different font. That's God's sacred name, and they're substituting the word Adonai, Lord, for it. The Lord was with him. He was successful in whatever he undertook. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. From the watchtower to the fortified city, he defeated the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory. In King Hezekiah's 4th year, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, marched against Samaria and laid siege to it. At the end of 3 years, the Assyrians took it. So it's just described the last few years of that northern king of Israel's existence, and now the Assyrians coming in and taking over the northern kingdom. So Samaria was captured in Hezekiah's 6th year, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. The king of Israel deported Israel to Assyria. It didn't deport the whole nation. He deported a bunch of the men and then imported Assyrian men, like I said, to forcibly intermarry the Jewish women and create this half-Syrian, half-Jewish group of people known as the Samaritans. 2 Kings 18 describes that historical event. The king of Assyria deported Israel to Assyria and settled them in Hala, in Gozan, on the Habor River, and in the towns of the Medes. So they've gone as far as the territory that you and I today would know as northwestern Iran, near the bottom of the Caspian Sea. This happened because they had not obeyed the Lord their God, but had violated his covenant, all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. They neither listened to the commands nor carried them out. In the 14th year of Hezekiah's reign, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities in Judah and captured them. So Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent this message to the king of Assyria at Lachish: I've done wrong. Withdraw from me, and I will pay whatever you demand of me. The king of Assyria exacted from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace. At this time, Hezekiah, king of Judah, stripped off the gold with which he had covered the doors and doorposts of the temple of the Lord, and gave it to the king of Assyria. You see what he's doing? He had rebelled against the king of Assyria. King of Assyria marches and starts to take over all those fortified cities. Around Jerusalem, they had identified several towns where they had put like military outposts to try to protect the capital city. And the Assyrians have come up and attacked all of those. And now Hezekiah realizes, their army's bigger than mine. Basically, I need to surrender. And the king of Assyria has demanded so much wealth from him that he's even having to take off some of the gold that's been used in the temple itself, in Solomon's temple. Basically, he's raiding God's house to pay off and bribe this Assyrian king so that he won't come and kill everybody. The king of Assyria sent his supreme commander, his chief officer, and his field commander with a large army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. They came up to Jerusalem and stopped at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the washerman's field. They called for the king, and Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, went out to them. The Assyrians have come up, and they're demanding, Hezekiah, you come out and talk to us. Hezekiah doesn't come personally. He's just sent 3 of his counselors, 3 of his staff. The field commander said to them, give this message to Hezekiah. And because he's standing out there outside the gates of the city of Jerusalem, a lot of the people are up on the walls of the city gates, and they're listening to what's going on. This is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing this confidence of yours? You say you have strategy and military strength, but you only speak empty words. On whom are you depending that you rebel against me? Look, now you are depending on Egypt, that splintered reed of a staff, which pierces a man's hand and wounds him if he leans on it. Such is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who depend on him. And you say to me, we are depending on the Lord our God. Isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Come now, make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria. I'll give you 2,000 horses if you can put riders on them. How can you repulse one officer of the least of my master's officials, even though you're depending on Egypt for chariots and horsemen? Furthermore, I have come to attack and destroy this place. Furthermore, have I come to attack and destroy this place without the word from the Lord? And he used God's sacred name there. Notice that detail, that he used God's sacred name, Lord, there. The Lord himself told me to march against this country and destroy it. That's the Assyrian trash-talking the God of Israel to the king of Judah's servants. And the people of Israel, the people in Jerusalem, are hearing him do that. Hezekiah's officials are going to ask the Assyrian commander to please speak to them in Aramaic because they understand the Aramaic language, to stop speaking to them in Hebrew. Why? Because they don't want the ordinary people to hear this guy's boasting, trash-talking words. He's just offered to give them horses to come up and fight against him, provided they can come up with enough men to actually sit on the horses and come to do battle. And he's accused them of having looked to Pharaoh down in Egypt to protect them from the Assyrians. But that's not what Hezekiah is doing. Hezekiah is trusting in the one true God, but this Assyrian commander just lied and said, I'm doing this because your God told me to. That's just not the truth. But the people are hearing it. Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and Shebna and Joah said to the field commander, please speak to your servants in Aramaic. since we understand it. Don't speak to us in Hebrew in the hearing of the people on the wall. And the commander is going to blow off that request. But the commander replied, was it only to your master and you that my master sent me to say these things, and not to the men sitting on the wall, who, like you, will have to eat their own filth and drink their own urine? You see, he's certain that he can starve them out. Things are going to get bad, but they're going to dig that tunnel. They're going to have a water supply. Hezekiah is going to humble himself before God and pray to God, and he's going to lead the people to pray to God for mercy, for salvation. And the prophet Isaiah is going to come and deliver God's words to Hezekiah, God's real words. This Assyrian is speaking lies. He's boasting and lying at the same time. And Isaiah is going to tell Hezekiah, don't worry about it. God's got this. Don't worry about the fact that your city is surrounded. This commander is going to hear a word that's going to disturb him, and he's going to go home without bothering you. And when he goes home, he's going to be assassinated. And historically, that's what happens. Hezekiah will trust in the Lord, and God will deliver. We go ahead now to chapter 19. When King Hezekiah heard this, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and went into the temple of the Lord. He sent Eliakim, the palace administrator, Shebna the secretary, and the leading priest, all of them wearing sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amoz. They told him, this is what Hezekiah says. This is a day of distress and rebuke and disgrace, as when children come to the point of birth and there's no strength to deliver them. It may be that the Lord your God, notice that phrase in chapter 19. It may be that the Lord your God will hear all the words of the field commander, whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to ridicule the living God, and he will rebuke him for the words the Lord your God has heard. Your God. Confident but weak. Should have been our God. They should have had full confidence that our God is going to take care of his people. The king has sent this committee to get the word of God from Isaiah. And Isaiah is going to give them the correct word from God. But the people who are there, including the king and his servants, are having those moments of weakness in their own faith. And you and I should be able to relate to that. There are times in our life when things happen, they don't go our way, or we suffer some devastating type of loss, some sort of tragedy. And we have those moments of, God, why did you allow this to happen? Why didn't you stop this? God, if you love me, where were you when I needed you the most? We can understand why Hezekiah and his advisors and the people were seriously stressed out. They've just seen what the Assyrians did to that northern kingdom. Now they're surrounded. And even though they've done what they could, including building that tunnel through solid rock to get water into the city to withstand the siege, they know that the Assyrians' physical army is bigger than anything they can put up. But the battle belongs to the Lord. And so Isaiah is going to give the correct word to the people once Hezekiah prays to God, and everybody is praying with him. The king's not just praying in private. He's willing to put himself out there. He's wearing the sackcloth and ashes because he's in mourning. He knows we as a nation are in trouble. And he's crying out to God, we need you. That's not the act of somebody who's arrogant, who thinks he can do it on his own strength. Hezekiah knows better. And rather than pretending, rather than being bombastic and giving the people false hope and false courage and saying, we got this. He's admitting, people, we've done a lot of things wrong. We need God. And he's actually leading the nation in revival and repentance and prayer. When the field commander heard that the king of Assyria had left Lachish, he withdrew and found the king fighting against Libnah. Now Sennacherib received a report that Tirhakah, the Cushite king of Egypt, was marching out to fight against him. So he again sent messengers to Hezekiah with this word. Say to Hezekiah, king of Judah, do not let the God, little g, do not let the God you depend on to deceive you when he says, Jerusalem will not be handed over to the king of Assyria. Surely you've heard what happens when the kings of Assyria have done to all the countries, destroying them completely. And will you be delivered? Did the gods, little g, of the nations that were destroyed by my forefathers deliver them? The gods of Gozan, Haran, Rezpah, and the people of Eden who were in Tel Ashar? Where is the king of Hamath, the king of Arphad, the king of the city of Severim, or Henna, or Ivah? He's reminding the Assyrian king, he's reminding Hezekiah, look, my nation's conquered all these other nations. What makes you think your God's going to save you? He's going to withdraw temporarily from Jerusalem to go deal with this Egyptian king. But he's basically saying, I'll be back. And when I do, it's not going to go well for you, because he's bragging, thinking that his gods are better than the God that the Israelites worship. Hezekiah responds to the king's threats this way. In verse 14, Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers and read it. Then he went up to the temple of the Lord and spread it out before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed to the Lord. O Lord, and he's calling on God's sacred name there. O Lord, God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Give ear, O Lord, and hear, and open your eyes, O Lord, and see. Listen to the words Sennacherib has sent to insult the living God. It is true, O Lord, that the Assyrian kings have laid waste to these nations with their lands. They have thrown their gods into the fire and destroyed them. For they were not gods, but only wood and stone fashioned by men's hands. Now, O Lord, your God, our God, deliver us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms may know that you alone, O Lord, are God. Then Isaiah the son of Amos sent a message to Hezekiah. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. And notice he's still saying God of Israel, not just the God of Judah. Even though the Assyrians have conquered that northern kingdom, God knows where all of his people are. And God knows what the future really holds. That the Assyrians have bullied a lot of nations now. They've conquered that northern kingdom. But in the not too distant future, God's going to raise up Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, and they're going to swallow up Assyria before they come down and take Judah captive and take them off into captivity, because the people are going to, time after time, experience God's rescue. And instead of being thankful and faithful, as soon as God rescues them, they go right back to their backslidden, I can do what I want when I want to type of ways. So Isaiah is giving the message to Hezekiah. The virgin daughter of Zion despises you and mocks you. The daughter of Jerusalem tosses her head as you flee. Who is it you've insulted and blasphemed? Against whom have you raised your hand and lifted your eyes in pride? Against the Holy One of Israel. By your messengers you've heaped insults on the Lord, and you have said, with my many chariots I have ascended the heights of the mountain, the utmost heights of Lebanon. I have cut down its tallest cedars, the choicest of its pine. I've reached its remotest parts, the finest of its forest. I've dug wells in foreign lands and drunk the water there. With the soles of my feet, I've dried up all the streams of Egypt. Have you not heard? Long ago, I, God, ordained it. In the days of old, I planned it. Now I have brought it to pass that you have turned these fortified cities into piles of stone. Their people, drained of power, are dismayed and put to shame. They're like plants in the field, like tender green shoots, like grass sprouting up on the roof, scorched before it grows up. But I know where you stay. This is God talking. I know where you stay, and when you come and go, and how you rage against me. Because you rage against me and your insolence has reached my ears, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth, and I will make you return the way you came. This will be the sign for you, O Hezekiah. This year you will eat what grows by itself, and the second year what springs up from that. But in the third year row and reap, plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. Once more a remnant of the house of Judah will take root below and bear fruit above. For out of Jerusalem will come a remnant, and out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. And history records for us that it happened just the way that Isaiah told Hezekiah it would. Sennacherib hears some words that trouble him. He leaves he thinks he's leaving temporarily to go out and deal with the king of Egypt. And then he hears that there's trouble back home. So he goes home. And when he goes home, he gets assassinated by two of his own sons. 2 Chronicles chapter 32 is going to deal with this same historical period, so I'll ask you to turn there briefly. After all that Hezekiah had so faithfully done, because remember, Hezekiah has been a good king. He's been in office now for about 6 years, and he's done a lot of reforms. After all Hezekiah had so faithfully done, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and invaded Judah. He laid siege to the fortified cities, thinking to conquer them for himself. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come and that he intended to make war on Jerusalem, he consulted with his officials and military staff about blocking off the water from the springs outside the city. And they helped him. That's that Hezekiah's tunnel that I described at the beginning of this study, that if you ever get the chance to go to Israel, and if you're not claustrophobic, if you're claustrophobic, don't even think about trying to go through Hezekiah's tunnel. But if you're not claustrophobic, it is an extraordinary experience to be able to wade through, because like I said, I'm 5'4", and it came up above my knee and just below my shorts line, for this 5.5 football length long tunnel that snakes and curves and snakes and curves until you come out at the pool of Siloam. They dug that tunnel, 2 separate groups, chiseling in different directions. They met in the middle to provide for the city to have the water that it needed to survive this very 8th century BC attack on Jerusalem, because God was being merciful to his people, that God wasn't going to allow Sennacherib and the Assyrians to come and take Jerusalem. Once more, the people were being given a chance to repent and do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and they would see God's salvation. Everything pointed against it. The enemy had superior numbers of people. They had superior weapons. They had the city surrounded. And normally when you have a city surrounded and there's no way to escape without running into the enemy, It's only a matter of time until the enemy overtakes you. But God would not allow the enemy to overtake in this case. God caused the enemy to turn, to have to go back home thinking they'd just come back and finish the job later. And instead, Sennacherib was going home to meet his own doom. And so it's, in chapter 32, it's going to describe Hezekiah coming up with a way to divert that water, to make sure that they could provide for the people's need to withstand the siege. Things were going to get ugly for a while. But when you trust in God, storms are what you go through. Storms don't destroy you. And so in this instance, historically, Sennacherib winds up not only withdrawing because he heard a rumor that disturbed him, but he goes home thinking he's going home as a conquering hero, and instead he goes home to be assassinated by his own people, by his own sons, and Israel is spared. When you trust in God, you put your faith and hope in Him, you don't worry about what the enemy threatens to do to you. It's not that God promises you a life free of hardship, free of trouble, free of pain and suffering. It's that God says, trust me. I'm with you through this. Just like when they were wandering in the wilderness and the people rebelled time after time after time, and God kept showing them mercy. On that occasion, He withdrew His hand, and all of a sudden, here came all the snakes, and they were biting people left and right, and people were swelling up and dying. They realized, we messed up. And they turned back to God. And sure enough, God provided the provision for them. That snake on the pole, it had no magical powers. What it was a visual symbol, if you would, of God taking care of man's ultimate problem. Because you see, back in the Garden of Eden, the serpent approached Eve, and Adam was standing right there doing nothing, saying nothing, and the serpent deceived Eve, and she took the fruit and she ate it and gave to Adam, who was standing right there with her, and he just took it and ate it, and sin entered the world in the form of that serpent in the garden. In Numbers, when God tells Moses, here's what you do. You take the bronze, some of the metals that they've got, and you make this snake on a pole. The snake is being nailed to the pole. Sin nailed to the pole. It was a visual symbol of what God was already doing. He'd rescued them out of Egypt. He's with them in their wanderings in the wilderness. And the day will come when God will step into time and space, something that He created, as Jesus of Nazareth, and the Lamb of God will be nailed to the tree and take away once and for all the sin penalty that separates believers from God. If they thought it was magic, if they thought it was something that they needed to be worshipped, they needed to be corrected on that, and Hezekiah had recognized that. Hezekiah recognized that his nation was in trouble, that the enemy was bigger and more powerful the way the world counts power than his people were. And instead of submitting to the Assyrians and being hauled off, because that's what they had threatened, we're going to take you off into captivity and we're going to conquer this land. God had other plans. Hezekiah led prayer meeting. He put on the sackcloth and ashes. The people saw the king, the leadership, mourning and turning to God. They saw those priests mourning and turning to God. And so the people followed suit. When there's trouble in your life, you can count on God. Rather than allowing Satan to distract you and get you to doubt whether God cares or whether God's really big enough to solve your problems. You trust in God the way Hezekiah and the people of his day did, and you wait on his provision because God provides for his people. Next week, as we're continuing looking historically through the books of Kings and Chronicles, we're going to look at 2 Kings chapters 20 and 21, and we're going to look at 2 Chronicles chapters 33 and 34. Thanks for watching.